All right, so we're back. We're going to dig into our AFC, and we're going to start installing our AFC live. It's kind of the last big thing we have to do, except for dealing with the fuel heater delete and a new fuel pump. Now this AFC has been out before, so we don't have to deal with the safety screw. But if it hasn't been out before, there's going to be one screw that doesn't have any head on it. And there's a couple ways you can do it. You can take a chisel and punch a hole in it. You can take a die grinder, make a little grinder in it. But if it's been out, it will have a way to get it out now. So you'll see there what I did is I just loosened that bolt on the plate for the fuel solenoid just to get it out of our way so we can get the AFC out of there. And then that just picks right out of there. We're going to go ahead and remove our fuel plate while we're in here. So what happens here is this piece here moves back and forth based on the amount of pressure that the turbo is creating. I want to say vacuum, but this doesn't work on vacuum, it's just the opposite. As the boost increases, this moves farther towards the front of the engine, allowing more fuel travel on the rack, more fuel to the engine. This plate limits the travel of the rack as well. So we take that out with the AFC live kit, and that's going to be in there with regular headed screws. And then we'll take our fuel plate up. So that's our fuel plate. And this is a stock fuel plate. You can get different ones if you weren't doing the AFC live. Some people just grind them right off. Some people take them out. It's like if we just put it back together right now, it would be all fuel all the time. And you know, it would just be too much fuel. All right, so we're over here at the bench and we've got our AFC housing and we have to disassemble it. The first thing you're going to run into is a couple safety screws, and you have to get those out somehow. You can grind a notch in them. You know, there's a lot of different ways. One of the first things I'm going to do is take this fitting out of here because that has to be replaced. So on the stock turbo, the wastegate was driven from the boost signal over here through a metal tube over to the turbo. On the new K27, it's driven directly from the compressor housing. So we're going to set that aside, and then we're going to figure out how to best to get those out. All right, we forgot to get the video going here, but what we did is we used our little air-powered cutoff wheel, and we cut a slot in the screws so that we could get in there for a regular screwdriver. The Max Travel Kit comes with new screws to replace both of those, so we won't be using those again. So the first thing we want to do is take these out. And this is a you might call it a smoke screw. This is your pre-boost fuel. So we're going to take a 3mm and a 10mm wrench. I'm going to release the lock nut on that. And we're going to back that off until there's no resistance. Now we can go ahead and take the cover off this. And that's going to be a little stuck because of the diaphragm, you know, being stuck in there. So we're going to set that aside. We're going to take the nut off our diaphragm. And generally speaking, you don't need a new diaphragm. I did purchase one just because I figured it'd never be any closer. You take your spring out. And now the other thing we want to do is there's a star wheel down in there. At some point we need to crank that all the way back. We'll show you that when we get there. Now we're going to go ahead and take this apart. But on this end, this adjuster actually changes the height. So we want to make sure we mark that real well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scratch it really well, like right like that. And I'll know exactly where it goes. Set that down there. And then inside, if I can get you in there and show you, there's a little shoulder right there. You can get in there with your screwdriver like this and pop that up out of there, just like that. Now sometimes there's a washer under there, sometimes there's not. Let's set that aside. Take our foot out. Remember the direction our foot traveled, and of course our pin just fell out, which is fine. And this one does have that washer right there. I'm not sure. I think it's stuck there good enough. We're not going to worry about it. And now we need to take this plug out and adjust the star wheel. That is a, I think it's a 5/16 Allen. So we'll go ahead and get this thing back in the vise a little bit. Take that out. Should be a sealing washer there you don't want to lose. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn that star wheel all the way back in, which looks like it's pretty darn close already. I see it down in there turning maybe. If I hold my mouth just right. There we go. It's all bottomed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this up with brake clean. It's not necessarily a necessary step, but I want to do that. I just want everything as clean as I can as I put it back together. So this is the rod that the foot, this is the rod that moves based on boost pressure, and the foot sets into that rod. So that goes back in there like that, and you see it moves up and down like that. And then we have included in the kit is a new foot. Which is not necessary, I guess. You can cut your old one. So basically they want to get about a 1/4 inch more travel out of that, but this new foot does that for us. And then here's our max travel 30 to 35 psi kit. Get that out as well. And then we have our rod here. I'm going to clean that up real quick. Okay, so this has to go in there like so. The shoe wants to point, you know, towards the back housing, or however you want to look at that, but that's how it has to point. Well, let's try that. There we go. Now it's back in there. So now we want to put that little bolt back in there, and we want to set that back to match our mark right there. You can see our mark right down there. Right there. Snug that down. Now we're done inside here. Everything moves free. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn our attention to here. And we have a cover that I'm going to clean up. So this spring goes either way. It's down in there like that, on top of the, right on top of that wheel. And then you have 2 washers The small washer goes first and the big washer goes second. And you can see I could pull that foot up so we can get at that like that. And if I let the foot down, it's all going to come loose, but that's okay. Now we have our new seal kit. So there's our new seal. That's going to go on there just like that. So we're not reusing, we're going to reuse the nut and the spring washer, of course. But inside the old one, there's this big washer down inside. We're not reusing that because it limits the travel too much, but we are reusing that one. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on top, like so. And we're going to get our nut and our spring washer. And we're going to pick up on our foot and get that to come up through everything, like that. And we're going to put it all back together. Now, my understanding on this one is we want to tighten it until we see the rubber just kind of pooch out of there a little bit. We don't want it so tight that we break anything or cut a hole in the rubber. I'm going to clean that up. And now you got spring pressure, you see. Now you got spring pressure on the foot. And this thing turns quite a bit. And my feeling is one ought to try to find the center of the turn before he clamps it down. Just like that. And then this piece on AFC Live doesn't really matter because we're going out of here into the cab. But if this was a stock truck, this has to point towards the engine like this, and the hose comes out around and goes back into the intake. And this goes on the engine with this facing back, and this is the top. So if this is facing back, this is the engine side. This wants to go like this. And then we bolt it down. Now this is the one where I told you that they do give us some new bolts. Or one new bolt, I should say. I'm going to go ahead and cross corner and get a couple bolts started. Enough to hold down on the spring pressure. And then in the kit is the 4th bolt. Which is a 5mm if I get. Now, on your smoke screw, right here, let's see if I can get you guys set up so you can see everything at once. So this actually is your pre-boost fuel. So this arm, basically, the farther back this way it is, the less fuel you have at pre-boost before you actually step on the throttle and get going. So this is going to be loaded down. They recommend that you run it in until it touches, which is right there. You can just start to see that move. So you run it in until it touches. And then they recommend, if this is a stock truck, stock injector, stock delivery valve, they recommend 3 turns. If it's a little hot on the fuel with bigger delivery valves and bigger injectors, they recommend 1 turn. So there's a half and there's 1. So to recap that, there's a half, there's 1. You'll see we're just coming up against it right there. If you watch really close, and I'll go a bunch so you can see. You see that foot moving? That's adding fuel before it gets boost. So go up against the snug, half, 1. I want to lock that down. Now we're also going to leave the dust cover off this so that we can get back at it later. In case this isn't quite enough pre-boost fuel or it's a little too much, we can tweak that. So you just lock that back down like that. You're done with that part. The only other thing we have to do to this, a couple more things. We have to put our star wheel plug and sealing washer back on. Snug that up. And then we have to put one of these elbows in right here. And this goes to the AFC live, and we'll show you how that works a little later. But we're going to go ahead and put this elbow in while we're right here. And I don't think that's 10. Nope, it's not. Seven sixteenths. So we're going to snug that up. And they do come all with the pipe dope on them already. And this turns, so you don't really have to worry about orientation. You just want to snug it up so it doesn't leak. And that's it. That's all the modifications to this. We do have a new gasket for this, so we're going to go ahead and take that out of there and see if we can get the new gasket to stay in. But we're going to get you over to the truck and show you what we have to do to the truck.